Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the DSS Break. It's great to have you with us today. I'm Anna Annison, the founder of Data Science Salon, and today I'm streaming directly from our headquarters, which is beautifully located in the heart of Miami, just a few blocks away from the iconic design district. And we're here live every other week to discuss the world of data science, AI, and machine learning. And we chat about unique experiences and best practices with leading data professionals in a 15-minute break. And today I'm joined by Saras Nowak, who is the principal product manager at Mapbox, where she leads AI initiatives that sit at the intersection of geospatial technology and generative AI, which is super interesting. And prior to Mapbox, Saras held product leadership roles at Snowflake and AWS, helping shape data architecture and scalable cloud services that underpin modern AI workflows, which is amazing. And Saras actually recently joined us on stage at DSS San Francisco in November on the panel about architecting agentic AI, infrastructure evaluation, and real-time decisioning. And there she unpacked how to build systems that can really act autonomously, make decisions in context, and deliver real outcomes. And today on the break, we're going to explore those ideas a little bit further, from technical underpinnings to product strategy to what it really takes to bring agentic AI into real applications.
Thanks for having me, Anna. Really good to be here and connect with your audience, and I appreciate the warm welcome.
Of course. No, it's so great to have you and see you again. And I know that you've worked across all these different amazing companies like AWS, Snowflake, and now you're at Mapbox. Can you start a little bit by telling us a little bit what excited you about working at this intersection of AI, data infrastructure, and product?
Yeah, for sure. I think when I look back at my time across AWS, Snowflake, and now Mapbox, the common thread for me has always been working at the frontier, where technology is still being figured out. In a lot of cases, there is at best a tenuous understanding of the problem space in enterprise. Customer behaviors, user behaviors are still being defined. And that's where I feel like product decisions really genuinely like shape what's next and shape what's possible. So for me personally, there's always been this inherent excitement about technology and that I've carried with me for as long as I can remember. And over time, I've learned that I do my best work when I'm close to that cutting edge, so to speak, where things are still evolving. I'm more curious, more creative. I lean in harder, but luckily for me, it also attracts brilliant people with high degrees of ownership, and that just makes it really joyful for me. So my time at AWS, I'll briefly summarize like how that's shaped my product tense today is at AWS, it showed up in building foundational cloud primitives, right? So these are systems that operate at massive scale, but also have to be flexible enough so we can build for use cases that customers are still thinking of or have not even yet imagined. And this is also the place where I codified my practice of always be thinking about the customer and their experience. Now, when I think back to Snowflake, that curiosity was more pulled me towards data infrastructure and streaming systems. And so, what was exciting at that time was the shift happening, going from batch analytics to real time continuous processing. And the challenge there really was to turn these really complex distributed systems into something that's declarative and approachable for customers. And then at most recently at Mapbox, that's pulled me towards the intersection of AI data and the real world. So, as you can imagine, location data, places data is inherently valuable because users, we're constantly navigating the physical world. Now, bringing location intelligence into AI is changing how users interact with maps. And again, this is a new space that's being defined right now. Although I will say things move a lot faster now than they did probably a few years ago. So it's also a new experience and a learning curve for everybody, I think.
Yeah, no, that is an amazing answer. And I agree with you that things are moving so much faster. I think everything changed as soon as OpenAI, opened their box to the consumer, then everything started moving much faster. But let's talk a little bit about agentic AI, because a key part of it is real-time decisioning. From a product and architectural perspective, what are the infrastructure requirements to support reliable real-time agent behavior? I know this is like a big question, but I'm sure that you have a great answer.
Yeah, it is a tough question because I think these patterns are still being defined and they're very fast evolving. But I think for everybody, there are a few critical pieces that are now becoming non-negotiable. Um, I think from a technical architecture perspective, real-time pipelines are becoming table stakes. This is critical for agentic AI because your agents, you want them to be operating on the freshest state possible that's coming in continuously. And so you really have to think about data as a continuously moving artifact than something that you can apply instead of previously employed batch jobs, right? So what this means is as data changes rapidly, this can be user actions. And in our worlds, it's about reflecting reality that's actually true in the real world. So you see continuously updated maps, traffic conditions change all the time, points of interest change all the time, and spatial layers. And so data is changing, and you need the infrastructure and architecture to be able to support that. So your agents have access to the most freshest context available.
Right.
The second piece, I think, is about state management. So, general definition of agent is to be able to do multi-step work and produce predictable results as part of that. So, from an architecture perspective, you have to think about having idempotent actions. You need to support replayability and predictability, and you want to make sure that you avoid, doubling actions with your retries. When we talk about predictability, that also means that agents typically have to call external systems. And so, how do you ensure that you can get reliable execution from your agent when you're not in charge of the tools that your agent is relying on? And so, on your side, you have to think about implementing rate limits, having the right user permissions, having the right retry strategy, for example, but really thinking hard about the state management part of it. On the product perspective, I would say reliability has to be built into the product.
Right.
That means as a product manager, like you have to define what does good mean. And you have to design for that. You have to have graceful degradation when things are either slow or not responding. And also thinking about your domain is important because in a lot of cases, there is an inherent trust. And so looking at agents as something that is suggesting actions and then confirming with the user
Mhm.
versus operating fully autonomously. That's the longer term vision, but that requires a degree of trust in agentic AI that is still being developed. And so while we're in this state, we need to be thinking about how we uh, start to build that trust. And with that, suggesting actions, but confirming with the user could be a good way to start to build that trust because you want to see the agent taking consistently the right actions before that trust can be earned.
Right. No, that's a great answer. And let's talk a little bit about Mapbox and also geospatial context here. And how do we really think about location data change and AI agent behavior? Because I think a lot of people are not really aware how that works. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, luckily for us, it doesn't work that well yet.
So yes, you're in the cutting edge to figure that out.
Exactly. I think it's important to call out that geospatial is actually going to become very, very core to the search and query experience. Web search and geospatial tools, we think, are going to be tightly integrated with major LLM and assistants. And these will be built-in tools that the models can just call. So what that does is it enables LLMs to reason based on geospatial services that are grounded in real-world data. What's interesting is, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, is that large language models are not designed to answer time-sensitive real-world questions.
Right.
The fact is that LLMs often give you outdated information because the training data stops months or sometimes years in the past before inference happens. And so now we're seeing a rise in location-based, location-dependent tasks. Users are using AI, ChatGPT, and other assistants for doing trip planning or checking traffic conditions or finding what to do in a particular area. This is critical capability for agents to be able to answer these questions accurately. So one way that we see this playing out is in the agent space is to employ geospatial MCP servers, including Mapbox's MCP server. So as an example, Mapbox MCP server exposes core location APIs. You can do geocoding, you can do point of interest search, you can do routing. These are all available as callable tools for the models themselves. So what that enables an LLM to do is to chain these operations into a workflow that gives you the answers that you're looking for. But this is, again, this is evolving. So there's a lot of work here to evolve the MCP standard to be able to handle large data payloads. Long driving direction responses is an example, or large GeoJSON objects. How do we do that in a cost-efficient manner is something that we're still is being defined in the industry. And as we go further, we see the need for specialized agents that are built for specific domains to do specific high-value tasks. And that's where agents can play a significant role. For example, in the geospatial world, that can mean navigation agents, it can mean route optimizations, it can mean conversational maps. So it's basically changing how users interact with it. Instead of like point, click, pan, zoom, the typical interactions, it's becoming more and more conversational. And so for the LLMs to understand geospatial context to enable that, that's where geospatial MCP servers really shine. And I think finally, I wanted to mention about the agentic systems.
Right.
It's critically important that they act on the latest view of the world. Again, this is speaking from Mapbox experience. Hundreds of billions of location updates happen per day. Hundreds of millions of miles of sensor data is being collected. The extensive POIs and addresses. These are all constantly changing data. Road networks change. There's some construction happening. Rerouting is happening. This volume of like live data that's happening in the real world needs to be made available to the agents to return answers that are grounded in the current world and not just on the data that they were trained on. So it can have a snapshot of the world at time of inference, at time of action. That's going to be critically important to make geospatial agents successful.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Yeah, because we're going just from like those images that people took a while ago, right, on Google
Yeah.
Maps, just actually seeing live,
Yeah.
Images, which is amazing. And that's going to change. I mean, that could save lives probably, right? There's so many use cases that,
It
that's amazing.
opens up a whole new world.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the last question I have for you is, what are some of there's a lot of successes, but what are some of the most common pitfalls that orgs run into when trying to really do this and put this into agentic AI into production?
Yeah. I think we touched on these a little bit, but I think state management, as I mentioned, is going to be very important and has to be top of mind. You cannot build a really reliable agentic system with weak orchestration. And so, really thinking about reliability from that perspective is critical. You want your agents to be long running, context aware, autonomous agents that can take actions and they can deal with partial information or partial failures. So, developers really have to think about what agent behavior do you want to implement that makes them predictable with state management, retries, fallback patterns, so on and so forth. We also talked about real-time data
Mm-hmm.
and basically moving enterprise architecture to be ready for real-time inferencing. And then finally, I would say building strong guardrails.
Right.
Very important to define the boundaries of what the agent needs to be able to do. And I think this ties very well with, from a product perspective or a user perspective, like building that trust in agent actions. To be frank, no one feels comfortable right now with broad-based autonomous agents that can act without any observable track record. That does not instill trust. And so having that observability of consistently doing the right steps starts to build that trust. And that's really critically important. And somewhat connected is, as a product manager, setting the right expectation with users. Like, if you want to paint a very broad picture of all the things that this agent can do, but in truth it only performs really well for narrow scenarios, I think people have to really think about how you set the right expectation through your launches and through your marketing, so that you don't end up in a case where your users are disappointed because the agent performs well in narrow scenarios, but it's not broad based, and that was what was promised. So, in a lot of cases, and I'm not saying this is true for every case, but in a lot of cases, it's prudent to start with a narrow focus for the agent that you know it can do consistently well, and then thinking of expanding that out.
No, that's an amazing answer. Thank you so much, Saraz, for sharing your insights on agentic AI infrastructure evaluation and real-time decisioning. Your experience building AI products that manage context and act reliably across dynamic environments is incredibly valuable, especially as organizations move beyond proof of concept into real mission-critical deployments. And for our audience, please check out mapbox.com if you're not already using them or partnered with them. They are doing the latest work with this and agents that's out there. So, and to our listeners, where you're building conversational AI or autonomous workflows or agent-based experiences, this conversation really highlights the importance of thinking holistically about the product data and also the architecture. So thank you so much, Saras. Thank you to our audience, and we'll see you at the next DSS break. Have a great
Thanks
rest
for
of the
having me.
week. Of course.
Thank you.
Bye.